Financial statement review. Robin, you're back.
I'm back. So it's not the actuaries, it's the So now that we have audited financial statements with an unmodified opinion, we would like to share the highlights of those statements with you. And the first thing that I want to do is to acknowledge the effort of staff who are in the audience, at the table, and upstairs in terms of the massive amount of work it has taken to get to the point where we no longer have a material weakness in internal controls over financial reporting. I certainly am proud of that, and I want you to understand how many people were involved in making that happen, whether it was in the financial services branch, within our investments branch, within benefits and services, throughout the organization. It has been a tremendous effort, and I personally have celebrated that transition, and I just want to share that congratulatory feeling with you. So here with me, I have Lucy Arbuckle, who is our manager over financial reporting and general ledger, Art Martinez, who's the assistant director of accounting, and Shafat Hassan, who's the senior manager over investment accounting. As you can understand, big players in this. And then I have a whole crew of staff in the back from, and would you guys stand up, please? Who were involved from various perspectives: internal control, risk, contributions accounting, which you can understand in this GASB 67 transition has been difficult, financial reporting and general ledger, and investment accounting. So I certainly want to shout out to all the effort that they put into this process and thank them for their effort. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Art, who's going to kick off the presentation. We hope we have provided
Robin,
captivating highlights.
Before you continue, I had someone weigh in here. Tom?
I just want to congratulate you for the progress. It's really an important, major step forward, and I know it was a lot of work. So congratulations to you and the whole staff.
Certainly not a very sexy topic, but a very important one.
Oh, it's captivating.
Oh, it's captivating.
It's captivating.
But very important. Thank you. Thanks, Tom, for pointing that out. Okay, back to you.
Okay, first off, I'd like to just go over some of the accomplishments. I mean, Robin already touched upon a couple of them, but first, we had two opinions. Both of them were unmodified, one dealing with our financial statements and the other one dealing with two new schedules that we've included within our financial statements, special purpose schedules that are used or can be used to assist employers in their implementation of GASB 68. The other one, which Robin had touched upon, was the elimination of the material weakness over financial reporting. And again, this was a material weakness that we've had for a number of years. It dealt primarily with our accounting and financial reporting preparation process. So as Robin stated, we're extremely happy that that's been eliminated. Next, we were able to meet our deadlines for providing CRO the financial statements, which was August 22nd. And this was almost 2 weeks sooner than we were able to provide them the financial statements last year. And in light of implementing such a big accounting pronouncement such as GASB 67, it was quite an accomplishment. We were definitely able to see the benefits of Business Direct in enabling us to prepare these schedules, which have a significant amount of information, and also with assisting us with the ability to close our books sooner and actually get the financial statements together. Again, as we've talked about, we were able to implement GASB 67, and I don't know if I need to say anything more. It was quite an undertaking this year. It took a lot of effort from a lot of people. Took system improvements and enhancements to generate the schedules that you see in the financial statements, which increased our statements by about 40 pages.
Pound.
Yeah, so they're quite large. And then finally, we received the GFOA Award for Financial Reporting and Excellence for fiscal year 2012 and 13. Now what I'd like to do is to go over the financial statements or condensed financial statements that you would see or find within the management discussion and analysis section within the financial reporting package. And I'm not going to go over this in too much detail. I just want to provide you an overview of it. And the statement of fiduciary net position for the STRP is really what many of us would term a balance sheet. It provides information with regards to our assets and our total liabilities, and the net position, which is really the difference between the assets and liabilities. And our net position increased to $190 billion over the prior year, which represented about 14.5% increase. This is the statement of changes in fiduciary net position. And this is what many of us would refer to as an income statement. Provides information on the additions, which really represent the income coming into the fund, and also the deductions, which represent the expenses. And then the difference between the additions and deductions gives you your net position increase, which really represents sort of a net income for the STRP. And that increase was $24 billion over the prior year, which was a 60.5% increase over prior year. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Shafat so she can provide you an overview of some of the more significant changes that we made to our financial statements as it pertains to investment-related activities.
Thank you, Art. One of the most significant changes we made with regards to the 13-14 financial statements was in how we presented the investment assets within the statement of fiduciary net position, or in other words, like Art said, the balance sheet. I would like the board to note that although GASB provides high-level guidance as to how to present the investments, it refrains from providing specific, detailed presentation guideline. On the screen is a partial snapshot of how we presented the investments for fiscal year 12-13. And as you can see, the presentation was generally from the standpoint of how the investment portfolios are managed, such as private equity and real estate investments. And to meet the high-level GASB requirements, there were also debt and global equity securities. And this is how we have presented the investments within the balance sheet for fiscal year 13-14. We have the investment assets broken by broad category of investment types, and we also augmented this presentation with a schedule of investments within the notes of the financial statements to provide additional detail into what these categories hold. And I apologize for the font, I do have printouts if somebody needs to look at them. So the debt securities generally include exchange-traded investments such as asset-backed securities, corporate bonds, and mortgage-backed securities. It also includes short-term such as commercial paper and certificate of deposit. Equity securities include common and preferred stock and such. And within alternative investments, we have private equities, real estate, and any other limited partnership type of investments. Derivatives include options, write-in warrants and swaps, and finally, the securities lending collateral, which is offset by the securities lending obligation within the liability section. And as I mentioned earlier, GASB refrains from providing detailed presentation guidance. We went through extensive research and identified the ideal presentation layout. We talked to other pension plans, our peer groups, wrote internal policies, and we feel this presentation layout is ideal and it provides the most value to the readers and users of the financial statements. We feel it provides 3 distinct benefits. It provides greater financial reporting transparency. It's consistent and aligned with the financial statement notes and disclosures, and it's compliant with upcoming GASB requirements such as the new fair value guidance, which is due to be issued in February of 2015. Another new information that was added due to GASB 67 was the money-weighted rate of return. It's also known as the internal rate of return, or IRR. The IRR measures the performance of the investments from the perspective of the overall plan. It takes into consideration the impact of cash flows such as benefit payments and contributions. It was 18.6% for fiscal year 13-14, net of all investment expenses and based on financial statement results. And for your informational purposes, we would like to briefly discuss the time-weighted rate of return, which is released by the CalSTRS Investment Office for the same period. The time-weighted rate of return is a measure of the investment manager's performance. It does not include the impact of cash flows that are not within the control of the investment manager. It is gross of fees and based solely on the performance of the portfolio. The two numbers are not only different in their use for CalSTRS, they're also inherently different in their calculation and all the inputs that go into the calculation. And as you can see, both the numbers are quite close to each other for fiscal year 13-14. It is important to note a significant difference that can be caused by the third bullet in each case. The money-weighted rate of return is based on financial reporting, financial statements, and is subject to accrual basis of accounting, which means that it needs to reflect all the investment valuations that we have received up until the date we actually issue the statements. Specifically, the private assets, which generally lag a quarter. As a result of this, we may expect to see the time-weighted and the money-weighted return differ more significantly in any given year. And with that said, I'd like to hand it over to Lucy or Buckle, who'll go over the more significant or more interesting changes.
This is where the fun begins.
I love this financial tax. Yeah, I like that.
We're trying to keep you awake.
Hey, I'm there. Work.
Okay, good afternoon. So I will be walking you guys through some of the new schedules as a result of the new GASB standards. So the slide that you're looking at right now is a part of our Note 3, which used to be the discussion of the funded status of the plan. Because of the new GASB standards, GASB has implemented or at least introduced a new measure now that kind of separates the funding measure and accounting measure. So the way that we present our Note 3 currently is the accounting measure of our net pension liability. GASB has also concluded that information about the magnitude of the total pension liability, which assets are being accumulated for, are so significant that it requires a disclosure of the percentage of the net position as over the total pension liability. So as you can see from this slide, our plan has 77% fiduciary net position over the total pension liability. So the next slide is a continuation, which is also part of our Note 3, but discusses the method and assumptions that we use in calculating our NPL. Our NPL is rolled forward using the June 30, 2013 valuation using the 7.6 assumed investment rate of return, which is gross of admin expenses. GASB requires that a blended rate be used by a plan if the plan is projecting to deplete its assets before paying off the liability. The plan uses the investment rate of return up to a point where the assets are no longer available to pay the liabilities, and then the remaining liability will then be discounted using a high-quality municipal discount rate. With the enactment of the new funding plan via AB 1469, our external actuary has now projected that the plan has sufficient assets or sufficient resources to pay off the liability in all future years, resulting to us exclusively using the assumed investment rate of return, and it significantly impacted the calculation of our net pension liability. So this schedule right here shows the sensitivity of the STRP net pension liability as discount rate changes. This is one of the requirements of GASB, is to provide a measure of calculation using a +1 percentage point higher and a -1 percentage point lower to our current discount rate. So historically, we've been presenting changes or sensitivity of our UAAL to various discount rates in our MD&A. GASB now requires that this be included as part of our notes to financial statements. And so, but pertaining to the net pension liability, management has decided that, even though GASB only requires for us to show plus minus 1% change, we've decided to continue showing the sensitivity of the net pension liability with various discount rates.
Lisa, can I just ask a clarifying question real quick? The current discount rate, you had 7.6 there, is it,
Yeah, so
I'm sorry, can you explain, why is it different than 7.5?
Because we leave the administrative expenses.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay.
That's all I needed to know.
Yeah. So there is a 10 basis point
Got it.
difference.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure you-
Okay, so on to the next slide. So this next slide talks about the other pension information section of our financial statements. This is actually the last section of our financial statements. We've prepared this section to assist the employers in implementing GASB 68. So GASB 68 requires that the employer recognize the liability as a proportionate share of the plan's total net pension liability. In addition, GASB 68 also requires employers to recognize a proportionate share of the plan's collective pension expense, deferred inflows, and deferred outflows. The AICPA state and local government expert panel suggests that the plan engages the auditor to obtain reasonable assurance and provide an opinion on the reports and the related notes. As discussed by Art a while ago, we did get an unmodified opinion on this section of our financial statements. This schedule is the schedule of proportionate share of contributions for employers and non-employer contributing entity. This is just the last page of the total schedule. It's actually a total of about 30 pages. If you see on the right side, that's the proportionate share of each of the employer, including the proportionate share of the state. We've calculated the percentage based on total contributions during the year, including the accrual and reversals of prior period accruals. So one example would be if you look at City College of San Francisco, they have a proportionate share percentage of about 0.013% based on their total current year contributions of $492,000. We've also prepared an employer reconciliation report schedule, which employers they can access this report through the account portal, the contributions account portal. This particular schedule will help them reconcile the contributions that they have to what we're reporting in our financial statements. Any questions so far through here? Good. So the next two slides, this and this, this and that. So these next two slides just shows the collective pension expense and the deferred outflows and inflows of the plan. So currently, the only item that's impacting this schedule is really the difference between the projected and actual earnings and plan investments. And we work really closely with Milliman on coming up with the numbers to be presented on this schedule. OPEB plans, sorry for the typo, it's supposed to be OPEB. So the OPEB plans still fall under the old standards, but GASB has recently issued an exposure draft that will make the reporting of the OPEB plans now consistent or similar to DB plans under GASB 67. Our OPEB plan has an unfunded liability of $582 million based on the June 30, 2012 valuation. This is a biennial valuation, so we don't have a valuation for June 30, 2013, but we're expecting to have the June 30, 2014 valuation sometime in April 2015. So what are the upcoming changes? Right now, our team is performing an analysis to determine the impact of us recognizing the liability as a result of CalPERS proportionate share. GASB 68 will be effective this fiscal year 14-15. In addition, Shifat's team, the investments accounting group, is very busy responding to, well, actually, they responded to the comment on the exposure draft on the fair value leveling disclosures. I know we're actively participating and is still kind of working on mucking up the financial statements. And I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Lucy.
You're welcome.
Robin, was any other
No,
presentation?
only if you guys have, if you have questions, if the board has any other questions. It's great reading if you're
But it was
having a
prob-
hard time
It was
following.
probably addressed in the write-up and it was probably stated, but, and we've probably heard this in the past, but I'd like to hear it again for my own information. It's easy to come up with the valuation of a stock, right? We know what it is. We can figure out the valuation of a real estate investment by looking at comparable buildings, square foot, average price per square foot, bonds, same thing. What's the process for the valuations of coming up with valuations in private equity?
So I'll let Shafat go into the details, but I'll start it off and then she can fill in any missing
Are
ingredient.
there differing views in the industry as to how we come up with
So
valuation?
most of our peers, as well as CalSTRS, use a computation called net asset value, which is based on the financial position from the general partner. And those, we require audited statements from the general partner, so we're relying on that particular auditor and the general partner to provide us accurate results. We also have to review those statements, and we pull a sample of those on an annual basis to ensure that we agree and are comfortable reporting that data.
Okay.
So, and it is also audited very carefully as a part of the review of the external auditor of our financial statements to the extent that it's a material item and it is significant in terms of estimates. So because those are long-term holdings, the gains or losses reported are not realized.
Right.
So you're absolutely right. And that's part of what this new GASB statement's going to do is to require us to disclose based on the kind of input that we're using or relying on to
come up with
present
that.
the fair value. And so it's going to reflect much more like what you see in public sector or public market companies related to those types of investments, in that we'll have those requirements for disclosure. So the reader can see, based on standards in terms of the inputs to that value, what percentage of the portfolio is valued according to active markets,
Sure.
what percentage is valued according to a partial active market and a partial estimating, and then what percentage of the portfolio is valued using inputs that cannot be validated against an active market.
Thank you.
So.
Did anyone else want to add to that before?
Just a quick note too. I think what Robin explained is absolutely correct, and most of the private equities will be a level 3 with the new GASB pronouncement, which kind of will tell the reader that they are most riskiest to value. They're the most hard to value assets.
Right.
So that's, I think GASB is going towards
Thank you.
that.
Paul?
Yeah, I just wanted to say yesterday, audit risk management spent about 2 hours going over the statements and speaking with the auditors, and had a very thorough and at times fairly lively conversation about this because of all the changes. And I would just urge the rest of the board that Robin and her staff prepared some other superb background information reconciling what the UAAL measurement was in the past to the net pension liability measurement that now is required by GASB 67, reconciling the actuarial liability that we get from the auditors to the net pension liability. Explained a lot of it, was very, very useful. Want to, echo what Tom said about the incredible accomplishment with respect to the
Material weakness.
material
The
weakness.
material
Thank
weakness.
you. We do have one remaining, which we know is related to member data, recognizing that the staff is hard at work at addressing that as well, and probably recognizing to some degree a limitation in terms of until pension solution is done, we might be limited, so we can't really hold. I mean, we've got a process in place that I think is addressing that very well. I would say the one other thing is in talking with Crow, our auditors, it appears that we're about the first major pension system to actually do the implementation of GASB 68, to put together the.
Should we get more cake?
well, maybe. I mean, it was quite a process. Crow and our Robin staff went and did a partial audit of 100 school districts to make sure that was done well and was done accurately. And we had a good discussion about it, and apparently Gatsby was even listening in on our discussion yesterday.
Should we
So,
wave to them today? Are they watching again?
I don't know, but I mean, it was a great effort. It was a very,
great.
comprehensive effort. And we've been preparing for this for a long time. And so again, thank you, Robin, and all of Robin's staff. As well as our auditors who are not here with us today, but have been.
Audit services and their
Yes,
staff.
and, absolutely, Larry and audit services. So,
Thanks,
thank you,
Robin.
everybody.
Thank you so much.
guys.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, thanks for reminding
Number
me.
6 on the agenda,
Because I'm not on it, so I feel like I'm
the
proud.
pension solution budget. Chris, you coming up to Chris Coyote? Hi, Chris. And welcome Robbie to the dais. Robbie, good to see you, Robbie. Go ahead, Chris, and Robin.
So I'm actually going to kick this off, and again, it's all about numbers today, I think. So what we've tried to do with this informational item is just to bring back to the board the overall summary of the pension solution budget and our approach to monitoring that budget and planning for spending, just the framework of how we're going to ensure that we can control the use of that sizable budget so that we're all comfortable that we are appropriately managing that significant amount of money coming out of the trust. So in terms of our cost accounting framework, we have a multi-year appropriation / budget that you approved for us last year. We are deploying that via an annual spending plan and allotment process within Business Direct so that we do set up a framework of control that's at a lower level of detail than the significant dollars in the annual and the total appropriation. We will compare the budget to the annual projected spending and the annual costs and total costs over time so that we've set up that framework. This next slide gives you a picture of the total dollars by fiscal year as well as the components or the anticipated components of that spending. You see our staff, the OE&E associated with that staff, and then external spending to various contracting parties, not solely the major implementation vendor, but also the other kinds of support like independent validation and verification that we need, the oversight component that will be specific to this project. So we want to make sure that we're both planning for and tracking all the costs of the project so we can compare that to the earned value as we proceed through the detailed planning and implementation phases. The other thing that I want to assure the board is that we have planned in terms of stopping the actual budget change proposal for the pension solution by accumulating reserves in terms of our technology appropriation. That was part of the reason that we set it up that way, was so that we could accumulate those reserves. In particular, we're focused on our data preparation / cleansing / conversion activities. We want to make sure that we have not forgotten that very critical part of the project as well as the funding for that critical portion of the project. In terms of the budget management or the budget management process, the annual spending plan will be presented to and reviewed by the Enterprise Program Investment Council, which consists of members of CalSTRS executive staff. As I mentioned earlier, the annual allotment amounts and controls are in the Business Direct system. To the extent that there are changes needed to that annual spend plan, it will go through that review process again, and then on a monthly basis, we will monitor the budget against the actual costs, and we are implementing time tracking capabilities so that we can monitor the actual internal spend, which is sometimes the tricky part of managing costs in this scale of a project. And we're using the Clarity solution as well as Business Direct capabilities to be able to do that. So you see the implementation of those increased tools that will allow us to monitor our progress on the money side. In terms of this year's annual spending plan, we have a large budget and we have only allotted a very small portion of that because we are still concluding the procurement phase. We do have staff assigned to the project to work through that procurement phase. We are using staff, as Peggy alluded to, from other operational areas to participate in that, to make sure that we have applied the appropriate subject matter expertise to those efforts. We funded travel for vendor demonstrations and interviews, and we also have certain external contracting staff here helping us with this phase in terms of the actual project management of it and making sure that we are reviewing the proposals by our competing vendors in a way that aligns with their expertise in the market. We are including in the costs both direct project costs, indirect costs, and the way we're defining these, and I'll give you a simple idea. I don't know that our policy has been finalized yet, but the way I think of it is, in my particular case, if I'm spending an hour I wouldn't have spent without the pension solution, I see that as a direct project cost. If I'm spending 15 minutes or I'm doing something that I would have always done, like the preparation of a BCP, that's not included. So that's the distinction between a direct and an indirect cost, where it is trickiest in terms of our own staffing resources, particularly for people who are not assigned to the project full-time. So in terms of this year's results, you can see the spending plan and then the actual costs to date. Again, we are under our spending plan as we are completing the procurement process. We have allowed for buildup in terms of staffing through the end of the second half of this fiscal year so that we can ensure that we're prepared to bring the vendor on board. In terms of our reporting parameters, we, as I mentioned earlier, are planning to make sure that we're reporting to managers and staff on a monthly basis, to you on an ongoing basis at each meeting, and then through our quarterly and annual reporting process, and again to the Department of Finance and the California Technology Agency and the legislature in an annual report. And with that, Chris and I are happy to answer any questions either on this presentation or the write-up that we provided you. Again, the purpose was just to let you know that we are establishing a framework to control this significant budget.
Seeing none? Thank you. Chris, were you going to add anything, or is that? Well, good. Thank you. Like that. Thanks.
Chris, you said, is that on a report on the? Yeah, we're going to get to yours right now.
Can you take that one?
I don't really have anything on the CEO report. What does that mean?
Should we do the next item? Hey, Greg. Hi, Greg.
On the CEO report. Are you sharing right now?
Yeah, I am.
The CEO report was next, and other than just to make sure everyone noticed that currently no one's identified an item for December, so we don't have anything actively scheduled for December or January. So right now we'll see each other in February.
That's right. Great.
All right.
Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Graham Finley with Grant Thornton, here to present our regular independent oversight report on the active business renew project, and I have no numbers. So hopefully that's a good thing. So we're here to talk about pension.
Shake things up, aren't you?
Well, it's just a little change of pace. So we'll talk about pension solution first. Thank you. And as we've done, I think, for the last couple of meetings, when we're talking about pension solution, there are really two streams of activity. There's one related to the actual procurement, and then there's one in terms of the readiness of the project to begin implementation work once a contract is signed with an implementer. So I'm going to talk about each of those separately. So overall, from a procurement perspective, the project is still on track, on schedule. Final proposals have been reviewed, been evaluated, site visits have been conducted, reference checks have been completed, the down select is complete, and the remaining vendors have been notified that they're going to start taking part in best and final offer negotiations, which start next week. And they'll proceed through November and December. And as of today, the project is on schedule to make the award, as originally planned. So from a procurement perspective, pretty much everything's tracking pretty much on target. Where we have any concerns is really in the area around readiness of the project to be ready to start work once a contract is signed. And I would say probably the biggest area of concern at the moment is around staffing. We've talked a little bit around there's some resource challenges in the organizational change management area that have prevented some activities being completed as originally planned. The project team is trying to hire to address those. I think probably the larger issue at this point around staffing is to do with some roll-off of staff. And in fact, there are three individuals in project management positions who are going to be transitioning out of the project over the next few months. Not all of those were unexpected, but the timing isn't ideal from a perspective that it's happening all at once. It could be worse in terms of the fact that it's happening towards the end of the procurement, so there is time to address the departures, but the business lead for the project, the actual day-to-day project manager, and then the procurement support individual are all transitioning away from the project. The project manager in particular, we think, is leaving a big gap. This is going to be a big challenge for the project over the next several months to try and fill this role. This is a really, really key role for the project, and it's critical that they have the right person in that role. We've sort of been talking to Chris about the kind of person that is likely necessary to fill that gap, and we've actually suggested that the organization might consider re-looking at the staff classification and potentially looking at a higher staff classification than was originally intended, because you really do need a very high caliber and experienced individual, and we think it's worth going the extra mile to try and find the right person there. There are a few months to probably fill the position, given the spot that the contract is in right now. The BAFO negotiations are happening. There'll be an intent to award early in the new year. But once you get into the spring, it's really getting into the process where you need the right person in place. So that's probably our major concern at the moment.
So just to add to that, as Graham indicated, the change in the project manager is, while we've kind of known that for a while, we've been talking to them about a transition because they've anticipated a transition into retirement a little bit down the road. Life happens. And as we've seen today, we've had 2 long-term employees here that are going on retirement. Changes in life happen, and so they made a decision to retire from state service a lot sooner than they anticipated. Going back to what Graham said, if it's going to happen at any time, right now is probably, while it's never an ideal time, being as we're in negotiations, we're not on the day-to-day getting ready to do implementation activities or actually in implementation activities, it's mitigates that risk somewhat. So in the interim, we will be redirecting existing project management office staff to fill some of the initial gaps, while at the same time we'll be going out for a recruitment and looking at, as Graham referenced, looking at upgrading the level of that position so we can really get a really solid recruitment of somebody that's got expertise and caliber of experience. At the same time, we've already, as part of the budget that we just went over, we've also be soliciting additional project management support resources, which were already part of the plan anyway. So being able to bring those additional resources on board at the same time, we do have a little bit of time, but we're not going to wait till the end. 6 months will go by fast. It will take a little time to recruit that, but I'm pretty confident we can get a replacement in there before we get to the implementation phase, which is going to be really critical for us. And I'd just like to add one more thing. Sue Ziegler, who's the project manager that's retiring, I would like to acknowledge her because she's been part of CalSTRS for over 13 years, initially as a contractor, then she became a state employee, mainly because she really believed in the passion and the mission of this organization and the people here. So she really was instrumental in the technology move coming into this new building, setting up some of this wonderful technology that you guys all use every day. She was the project manager over this implementation of the Secure Employer website. She actually was a key figure in actually getting the future state architecture launched, which was the predecessor to this implementation phase of the project. So while Sue is already departed us, I just wanted to give a shout out for her contributions to CalSTRS.
This topic, I think, plays into what will probably be our major theme over the next several months. It really is with transitioning out of the procurement process, focusing on what does it take for the project to be ready to begin work with the integrator once the contract is actually signed. And so we've got a set of activities that I want to talk about a little bit. So, for the next month or so, we're really going to be focusing on, if you like, it's sort of the closeout process in the formal procurement process, the monitoring the best and final offer negotiations, monitoring the actual intent to award process. But then really what we're going to be focusing on is the project ready to begin implementation work? And so to that effect, what we're putting together and what we're going to be working with the project over the next 4 to 6 months is a sort of a checklist, effectively, of the things that we think the project needs to be focusing on to make sure that they are ready and ready to begin working with the vendor. So I won't go through all of these, but I do want to talk about a few specific items. So business requirements is one of the ones that we want to spend some time looking at, because something we've learned from some both sort of an industry perspective, but also some specific projects that have occurred in California in the recent past. The clarity of the business staff and the business leadership within the client organization, like how well they understand their own requirements and how much unanimity and consensus they have about what those requirements are, is really, really important. So we want to be sort of ascertaining that and making sure that the business actually know their own business, which isn't always the case. Contract management and oversight is a key area. Again, I think there's lessons that have been learned here in the state in recent years, that even if you get a good contract and the state has the appropriate contractual protections, that only makes a difference if the state effectively manages the contract and uses those protections. And so that's something we'll be looking to make sure that there's actually a formal contract management function in place with the right staff. And then a lot of it is that there's some blocking and tackling basic processes around things as simple as deliverable management. Do you have a defined process? Do you know who's going to be reviewing deliverables? What are the acceptance criteria? How are you going to make that work? How are you going to make sure that you get back to the vendor on a timely basis so that they're not waiting on CalSTRS? Those kinds of things are all very important from a readiness perspective. Data readiness, we've talked about a lot. You're leveraging the information coming out of the data preparation project, putting it to use, and making sure that the organization is ready from an implementation perspective. Financial management and resource management. Staffing is probably the biggest thing here, that the team has the right staff in place, both from a leadership perspective, we talked about that just a minute ago, but also all the way down the organization, that the right people are being employed, that it's the A team from both the business and technology side, and that the backfill is being appropriately planned. We've talked about governance a lot. We've talked about organizational change management a lot. The one other thing maybe on this slide that I'll highlight is the topic of performance management. We want to make sure that the project has clarity about how they're going to be measuring success. And it's not just, schedule and budget. Those are obviously important, but there are other areas around monitoring operational processes. And I remember from Business Direct perspective, I think there was some concern that the measures of what constituted the operational success weren't necessarily defined in advance or measured as a baseline prior to the implementation starting. And so we want to make sure that that's happening for the pension solution, and those appropriate metrics are in place so that once you get to implementation, you have something to look back on to judge whether or not the implementation has been successful. So this is not something that we're assessing or scoring the project on right now, because again, these are things that are really over the next 6 months need to be put in place. But by the time we get to sort of February or March timeframe, this is something that we'll be looking to see, where the project is as they're getting closer to contract award, to make sure that the project is in a strong position to be working with the integrator from day one, and basically driving the agenda with the integrator when they come on board. So any questions about that?
Sure, go right ahead, Brian.
When we discussed Sue, and congratulations, Sue, on your retirement, but it raised a question I'd at least like you to address to the board about the risk if you go through the recruitment process and you have a single point of failure by having a project manager who may or may not leave. And so what are your backup systems? What are your lessons learned from doing this, and how are you going to ensure that having all your eggs in that one basket is not going to represent a huge risk to the project?
Well, we can handle that a couple ways. Like right now, we can, on the interim, we have experienced project management staff to fill in the various different types of project management activities. But again, it's hard to find somebody with that breadth of experience and depth of experience. So having some external project management firm that we're going to bring in to provide those additional services gives us some of that backup. So if we ever run into that again, we will have an expanded pool of experienced resources to fill in gaps in the meantime. And we also have myself and the PMO director can step in that role in a kind of interim basis until we can get somebody on board.
Thank you. Probably the one thing I would say as well is that, a characteristic of a mature organization is that they run based on systems and processes and not on the skills and capabilities of individuals. If you have an organization that's dependent on specific individuals, that's a risk area in and of itself. So as we're looking at sort of the project management structure for the project, one of the things we want to be seeing is that it has the appropriate processes and tools in place and a depth of resources so that if any individual leaves, it's not a critical issue. And that applies to the business side and the technology side as well as the project management side. Any questions? Okay. So we'll move on to data preparation. So here, the initial phase of the data preparation project is complete. So the work with SoftSol, their deliverables have been provided to CalSTRS. They've been accepted and presented to the Data Preparation Steering Committee and also provided to the Pension Solution Project team. So we're now in the process where these streams of activity are actually coming together, and there's a series of assessment documents and recommendations that have been provided to the Pension Solution team, so they can begin to take those into consideration as they're planning the pension solution implementation. And also, the CalSTRS project team is putting together their plan about what happens next. And they're in the process of putting together a set of recommendations and requests to the EPIC group for presentation in November. It's basically going to the data preparation project team's request and recommendation for what do we do next in the period between now and pension solution implementation. So really our focus over the next month or so is looking at how are those recommendations being captured, are they really being integrated into the pension solution information, as well as being integrated with other efforts such as enterprise information management, which that initiative is kicking off again, and all of these threads have to come together, and we want to make sure they're all integrated and consistent and leveraging each other appropriately. So that's really going to be our focus over the next month to 2 months.
And just to expand on some of the other threads Graham was referring to, the data analysis report and recommendations is just one leg of multiple threads that we're putting together. We also have a data settling analysis happening through our legal office to see what the impact or what our boundaries are from a legal perspective when we get to data cleanup are. And we also have another effort on addressing inconsistent business practices that are often the source of corrupting our data and make sure that we have those aligned and get down to where we don't have inconsistencies there. So we're looking at multiple threads of how we're stopping the creation of bad data, and then the overarching piece of EIM, which is the proactive way of setting up standards and processes to make sure that what data, when we do cleanse it as we go through the process, retains that integrity and the clean state. And as well as when we get the new data coming into the new systems, we'll have standards. So when the new system comes up, it comes in cleanly and it retains its integrity at that point as well. So that's all going to be rolled into what we come to the EPIC Council in November with. So it'll kind of give us the long-term way to address our data all the way through conversion.
I think the February agenda includes a presentation on that topic.
That's correct. You'll be hearing something in February on that topic.
Okay. I think that's everything I have.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jack, I think you're up. Right?
No, I did that.
Oh, you did?
When you went away.
Oh.
When you went away.
It was-
In the blink of an eye.
Wow,
So we're on.
wow.
Sorry, I should have told you. We're on the
Okay.
So we are on,
economic impact of
Yep.
CalSTRS.
Item number 9, Ed and I spoke, we're going to move that to the February agenda, given the time of the day, the importance of the issue. It's a great report, as, it deserves a little different time of the day for it to be addressed. So we're gonna put that on, off to February.
Is he here?
Yeah, Ed's spoken with the,
Go to the one on
Gentlemen.
actuarial.
Yeah.
Thank you for being willing to move it.
Item 10.